Iranian armed forces have held nationwide parades to commemorate National Army Day. President Hassan Rouhani made a speech during a ceremony in Tehran. He reiterated that Iran's military might is solely for defensive purposes, but warned that the armed forces will give a strong response to any act of aggression.
National Army Day in Iran. Thousands of armed forces staged military parades across the country to mark the event. President Hassan Rouhani attended a ceremony on the outskirts of the capital, Tehran, where he assured neighboring countries that Iran's military might is solely for defensive purposes.
Our trend is avoiding tensions and encounters, but we need to remain vigilant in the face of plots hatched by the others and increase deterrent power. The regional states can rely on the Iranian armed forces. Our military power is defensive and deterrent in nature.
President Rouhani noted that the Iranian armed forces will give a strong and decisive response to any act of aggression. This, he added, is in clear contrast with the military of certain countries that are engaged in support for terrorism, as well as interventions in other states. As part of ceremonies to mark the National Army Day, the military also put on show its latest capabilities.
It's Syrian Independence Day, and Syrian flags and portraits of President Bashar al-Assad were raised and paraded by hundreds of Druze marchers. According to Israeli officials, roughly 20,000 Druze were absorbed into Israeli territory in the Golan Heights following the capture of the region in the 1967 Six-Day War. Israel and Syria are technically at war with one another, but apart from the occasional strike on weapons shipments headed to terror organizations like Hezbollah, Israel rarely intervenes across the border.
Russian Bear bombers flew near Alaska on Monday night, coming as close as 100 miles from Kodiak Island in Alaska. It's the first time since President Trump took office that Moscow has sent bombers this close to the United States. The nuclear-capable bombers came within the U.S. Air Defense Identification Zone Monday night. The U.S. Air Force scrambled 2 F-22 stealth fighter jets and an AWACS plane, a radar plane, to intercept the Russian bombers. The American jets flew alongside the Russian bombers for 12 minutes before the Russians reversed course and headed home. Last week in Moscow, of course, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said U.S.-Russian relations were at a low point while sitting next to his Russian counterpart. It's not clear, John, how these Bear bomber flights help.
Well, South Korea has called on Japan to refrain from exacerbating security concerns on the Korean peninsula. It comes one day after the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe mentioned a contingency plan in a parliamentary committee session. Abe was quoted as saying that his government is working on plans for a crisis situation on the peninsula, referring to a potential influx of Korean refugees into Japan. The South Korean Foreign Ministry responded by saying there was a need to refrain from making remarks that could cause misunderstandings or that could negatively impact the peace and security of the peninsula.
The Pentagon will conduct a series of tests next month to assess its own missile defense systems against the possible threat of North Korean missile launches.
The U.S. will conduct 2 missile interception drills next month to test its defenses against missiles launched from North Korea. U.S. media reports say that in the first test, A Standard missile will be fired from American ships stationed in the Pacific. The missile was developed in collaboration with Japan and will test the U.S. military's ability to counter a possible North Korean medium-range missile aimed at America's allies in the Pacific, mainly Japan and South Korea. The second test, which will reportedly take place near the end of May, imagines that North Korea has launched an intercontinental ballistic missile toward the U.S. mainland. During the simulation, long-range ground-based interceptor missiles will be launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California to counter the attack. However, while the missile defense system has been in existence for about a decade, it only has a 50% success rate in previous weapons tests. Meanwhile, the U.S. Defense Department has emphasized its willingness to engage in non-military interventionist strategies against North Korea's belligerent rhetoric. Defense Secretary James Mattis, who is currently on a tour of the Middle East, told reporters on Tuesday that the U.S. is working with China to bring about the eventual denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
Taiwan is reportedly seeking ways to strengthen the country's defensive capability on a disputed island in the South China Sea. This island, Taiping, is hotly contested between countries like China and the Philippines, but it seems Taiwan is really stepping up its claim to sovereignty by showing off its military might.
Yes, that's right, Mark. Taiwanese media outlets are reporting that the country's defense ministry and Coast Guard are formulating a comprehensive plan to boost Taiwan's defensive ability on the island. The ministry is known to have made 17 proposals to the Coast Guard administration, which is in charge of the island's defense, urging them to buy new domestically produced weapons so they can be deployed to Taiping Island. These are reported to include a remote-controlled multiple rocket launcher dubbed the Coastal Defense Rocket System. Others include anti-tank rockets as well as drones. Taiwan already has an array of light weapons on the island, but they are seen as being too weak and outdated to fend off threats from other nations that are also strengthening their defense capabilities to try and stake a claim to the heavily disputed region.
United States Secretary of Defense James Mattis will be traveling to the Middle East in hopes of securing regional cooperation in the war against terror. This Tuesday, Mattis is expected to arrive in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, to meet with senior government officials to discuss ongoing events in Syria and Yemen. Saudi Arabia is currently leading a military coalition against Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen, who have captured much of the country in a civil war that's left an estimated 50,000 dead. It is believed that the United States is considering bolstering support to the anti-Houthi coalition by supplying Saudi Arabian ally the United Arab Emirates with military assistance in the form of intelligence and aerial refueling capabilities. Mattis will also visit long-standing United States allies Egypt and Qatar, as well as their new regional partner in the Horn of Africa, Djibouti. He's doing this to, quote, affirm key U.S. military alliances, engage with strategic partners in the Middle East and Africa, and discuss cooperative efforts to counter destabilizing activities and defeat extremist terror organizations, end quote. On Friday, Mattis will then be arriving in Israel, where he will participate in a wreath-laying ceremony at the Yad Vashem World Holocaust Remembrance Center in Jerusalem.
A dangerous terrorist alliance in the works, apparently, in the Middle East. According to the vice president of Iraq, representatives of ISIS and al-Qaeda are meeting.
The discussion started now. Now, I don't know exactly when, but there are discussions and dialogue between messengers representing Baghdadi and representing Zawahiri.
Islamic State seeking alliance with al-Qaeda. Do you believe it?
I do. I think there's good and bad news in this. The bad news, obviously, is when your enemies are fighting each other, that's a good thing. They have been competing for the last number of years for primacy in the radical Islamist movement. Al-Qaeda claims it's the leader. ISIS claims it's the leader by building a caliphate. The good news in this is that it shows that the United States under President Trump is winning the war. And, you know, Al-Qaeda realizes now that they are not safe anywhere after the raids in Yemen, after the attacks in other places that were taking Al-Qaeda where they exist. As you see ISIS being rolled back from Iraq and ultimately knowing their time is limited in Raqqa and Afghanistan. And so you see all this, and I think now in desperation these two sides are coming together saying we can't compete with each other or we're going to lose. Let's try to unite forces because frankly our men and women are doing well.
French authorities have detained 2 men on suspicion of plotting an imminent attack. The arrests were made in Marseille just 5 days before the first round of the presidential election. According to Paris prosecutor François Molin, a machine gun, 2 handguns and 3 kilos of TATP explosive were found in a flat which was raided in connection with the investigation. Maïeddine M and Clément B, both French nationals and both well known for their radicalization by the specialized services and classified on the terror watch list since 2016 and 2015, met each other in prison, where they shared their cell for about 2 months in 2015 for common crimes. ISIL and jihadist propaganda had previously been found at the home of one of the suspects, Molin said. The other is believed to have had links to a Belgian jihadist cell. National security has been high on candidates' agendas in the run-up to Sunday's vote.
This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Brett Baer in Washington. A gunman in Fresno, California, kills 3 this afternoon in a shooting rampage, reportedly yells Allah Akbar as police take him down, and then tells police he hates white people. Police say the suspect, Corey Ali Muhammad, has a history of criminal activity.
Brad, it all happened within 1 terrifying minute on the streets of downtown Fresno. 16 rounds fired, in all 3 people killed. The victims, the Fresno police chief saying, all chosen at random by 39-year-old Corey Ali Muhammad, who was quickly confronted by a police officer responding to the shots fired.
Immediately upon that individual scene, the officer, he literally dove onto the ground and was taken into custody. And as he was taken into custody, he yelled out, Ali Akbar.
The Imam of the Islamic Cultural Center of Fresno says Corey Muhammad is not a member of his congregation and he does not recognize him. According to the police, Muhammad also called himself the Black Jesus. The chief said that on Muhammad's Facebook page they found posts in which he made some anti-government statements and said he did not like white people.
Y'all racists graft the white devils. We will continue to bring destruction and wrath upon America.
All 3 of the victims in today's shootings were white men. Police had apparently been searching for Corey Muhammad since last Thursday, when he allegedly shot and killed a security guard at a local Motel 6. They say he has a criminal history involving guns, drugs, false imprisonment, and, quote, terroristic threats. We are told at this point the FBI is not treating this as a terrorism incident. The police chief also said at his news conference that it is too early to say whether this was a terror attack, but pointed out once again the statement Muhammad made in Arabic saying God is great.
This is a Fox News Alert. The manhunt for the Cleveland Facebook killer is over. Hello, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith. Police announcing just hours ago that Steve Stevens killed himself in Erie, Pennsylvania today after a short police chase. And Mark Zuckerberg weighing in just moments ago at a developers conference on this tragedy in which his company played a key role.
We have a lot more to do here, and we're reminded of this week by the tragedy in Cleveland. And our hearts go out to the family and friends of Robert Godwin Sr. And we have a lot of work, and we will keep doing all we can to prevent tragedies like this from happening.
The Alabama legislature is reviewing a bill allowing a church to form its own police force. In the buckle of the Bible Belt, Briarwood Presbyterian is a small community, a daycare center, a seminary, and a school. Grades K through 12. It's a megachurch serving 8,000 people a day. A shooting this past weekend injured 5 teenagers and a baby at another church 15 miles north of Briarwood. In a statement, Briarwood pointed to recent mass shootings at churches and schools to reinforce their need. The bill would authorize Briarwood to establish its own independent police force. Opponents of the bill state that allowing a church to have its own police force grants a singular religion the authority of state government, which is a violation of the Constitution. However, it wouldn't be the first church in the nation with a police force. The Washington National Cathedral has 18 officers on staff, and observers expect Alabama state representatives to approve Briarwood's request.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions has painted himself as tough on crime, specifically drug use and illegal immigration. Now, he's going after a criminal organization involved in both. They're known as MS-13, an El Salvadoran gang that the U.S. Department of Justice says has more than 10,000 members active in at least 40 states and Washington, D.C. In a meeting with representatives of law enforcement and government agencies, Sessions claimed gangs like MS-13 are one of the biggest threats facing the U.S. In order to stop MS-13, Sessions calls for increased border security and immigration enforcement. That pairs with the Attorney General's call for more proactive policing. In an op-ed for USA Today, Sessions connected a decrease in arrest rates in cities like Chicago and Baltimore with more violent crime. President Donald Trump echoed Sessions' commitment to a more aggressive crime-fighting approach, going a step further to blame the Obama administration by name for the rise of MS-13.
A certain type of drone delivery causing a major headache for law enforcement. Remote-controlled mules are carrying drugs, cell phones, and other items beyond prison walls. In the UK, the flow of contraband into prisons has been a persistent problem, and the government says it's now cracking down on these smuggling operations nationwide. BBC reporting the UK created a new specialist squad of prison and police officers to investigate the deliveries. They'll examine drones recovered from unsuccessful runs, look into smugglers' methods, as well as the drones of choice. Then the investigators will pass down the information to local-level officers. Last July, the UK handed out its first ever jail sentence to a citizen for using a quadcopter to smuggle contraband into 3 different prisons over a 5-day period. The man was sentenced to 14 months in jail.
Venezuela criticized other Latin American countries for issuing a statement that called for nonviolence. On Monday, April 17th, 11 Latin American countries issued a joint statement from the Colombian Foreign Ministry that condemned recent violence in Venezuela and the deaths of 6 Venezuelan demonstrators. In anticipation of planned marches on Wednesday, the countries called on Venezuela to, quote, guarantee the right to peaceful demonstration. Venezuelan Foreign Minister Delcy Rodriguez criticized the statement in a Twitter post Monday, calling it, quote, rude interference. She also said, quote, these governments attempt to govern the country from abroad.
A day ahead of a national holiday in Venezuela, opposition leaders are calling on people to protest against President Nicolas Maduro. However, the president has called for a march of supporters on the same day, setting a scene for confrontation.
The Bolivarian National Militia must continue strengthening and expanding itself in the 99 integral areas of defense of the country. I have approved plans for the expansion of the Bolivarian National Militia throughout this year to 500,000 militiamen and women. They will have more equipment. The Bolivarian National Armed Forces will guarantee a rifle for each militiaman and a rifle for each militia woman. The resources have been approved.
That our migration system is seen to work in the national interest. It's seen to deliver for Australians. Of the most successful multicultural society in the world. We really are. 457 visa is abolished. It will be replaced by a new system that will be manifestly, rigorously, resolutely conducted in the national interest to put Australians and Australian jobs first.
Making good on his America First ideology, President Donald Trump is adding further restrictions to guest worker visas. Dubbed Buy American, Hire American, Trump's latest executive order will target the H-1B visa program, which allows 85,000 highly skilled workers to come to the U.S., oftentimes for the tech sector. Apple, Google, and Facebook take advantage of that program, but Trump calls it fraud and abuse in the immigration system, as outsourcing firms exploit the program. Trump argues the program is actually used to fill low-level positions, which, quote, take jobs from young college-trained Americans. Trump will look to overhaul the program's lottery system, which determines which companies can sponsor the visas, and that's already producing results. Workplaces anticipating a more targeted approach by the Trump administration cut back the number of applicants this year for the first time in 5 years. As for the Buy American part, Trump will add restrictions on government agencies looking to buy goods abroad in the hope of buying the goods here.
Hey girl, guess what? What?
So this is what Facebook bought virtual reality pioneer Oculus for, VR chat rooms apparently. The company's Facebook Spaces, which launched in beta Tuesday, uses Oculus headsets to let up to 4 people hang out around a virtual table. There have been a few attempts at creating a social space in VR. They usually involve bringing hordes of random online users into the same digital space. Facebook's version seems to be aiming for a more personal experience. It's apparently also available to phone users without an expensive VR headset. The product is part of Facebook's push to give its products more physicality. The company also showed off new technology that turns a cell phone camera into an augmented reality platform. Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg said he wants to use AR and VR to digitally change people's lives for the better.
Think about how many of the things that we have in our lives actually don't need to be physical. They can be digital, and think about how much better and more affordable and accessible they're going to be when they are.
Good luck to us all.
We can keep making doomsday movies, but we might want to give up on the old asteroid hitting an ocean causing waves of destruction trope. That's because researchers with the Los Alamos National Laboratory found that an asteroid landing in open water would probably be a little anticlimactic. Through 11 simulations, they determined about 80% of the asteroid's energy would vaporize nearby water, making it a gas. 20% would send water straight up in the air. Only a tenth of 1% of an asteroid's energy would go toward making waves, and while those waves would be big, they'd die out quickly. One of the researchers compared it to landslides in Iceland and Norway. In the 1930s, a landslide created waves that devastated a nearby village, but the water still couldn't travel very far. The researchers note if an asteroid hit within about 12 miles of a coastline, it would be devastating. But considering 70% of the Earth's surface is water and most of it is open, we should probably be more worried about an asteroid hitting land. Of course, we have movies for that plotline too.
Much to the relief of humankind, NASA recently announced that a fairly large asteroid headed this way and arriving on April 19th will not hit Earth. However, the speeding space object, officially known as 2014 JO25, will get relatively close. It is expected to pass at a distance of 1.1 million miles. That's about 4.6 times the space existing between our planet and the Moon. The asteroid was first noticed in 2014, and studies have revealed that it measures about 2,000 feet and has a surface that is very reflective. Its brightness could very well make it visible to those peering into the sky through small optical telescopes. The next opportunity to see the asteroid whiz by at this proximity isn't anticipated to come for another 500 years.
We can't wait to be the change. It's not too late, free from hate. Think of the future that we could create. Face the facts today. There's a better in peace.